This episode of Love Larn is sponsored by Scott Bonnar Fabrication and Parts. What we're looking at here is the shaft of the reel poking out through the side of the machine. I've just greased up that woodruff slot, and I've got a small woodruff key to fit in there. Cleaned out the slot itself a little bit as well, just had a bit of grime and stuff in there. Potentially from the sharpening process, I'm not sure. I'll just give it a little tap and check our fit. That looks good. So as usual, I'm just going to pop a bit more grease on that shaft. There's a lot of play on here already, but I believe these sprockets tend to be on the loose side anyway. And if memory serves, I had a bit of trouble pulling the sprocket off, so and try again. Get a washer on there. I'm not going to thread lock these threads either. The threads are a little bit grimy. This old cutter, not sure how easy we're going to go getting that on there. There we go. And we'll just tighten that up. Again, these nuts are a little bit tricky to manage without the chains on there to hold everything in place, but we'll come back to that one. That's pretty tight for now. Just eyeballing the alignment here as well, so our intermediate clutch will hang around up here, and there's the smaller sprocket in there which will align to here. So I think we're good to tighten up these bearing housings now and then get the adjusters into place. Time to get our cutter adjustment screws into place now. So they fit into these little brackets and screw into the pivot bolts that fit into the bearing housing assemblies. So the very first order of business is making sure that we've let off the pivot screw, the pivot nuts on each of these housings, so that these guys can move freely. We'll worry about setting the blade correctly once they're in place. These are the newer styles of adjustment screw, and they're right-hand threaded. I think the regular threaded. They turn clockwise to tighten into the pivot bolt as well as the little nuts. So the older style are reverse threaded, so just something to bear in mind when you're working with these things. Everything's kind of backwards until you're, depending on your point of view, I suppose. So the way I'm going to set these up, I've got, they've come with a single flat washer, and that washer needs to sit above the little bracket that's welded onto the side of the machine. In addition, I've got a second little washer that I'm going to pop below the bracket, and against which this nut is going to bear, just to make tightening and loosening things a little bit easier. So this is a little nylock nut, meaning it's a little bit of work to get it started, especially with the slot on the top of these things. So I'm just going to take this off for a minute, get a spanner around that, and try not to muck up the end of this screw. Also point out, I've got this extra long insulated red screwdriver. And the reason I bought this is because the tip, the flathead tip, mates very well, very precisely, well, you know, as close as I can get anyway, with the head of this bolt. If I use a regular driver, the tip tapers on it, and it's the very tip is too narrow to fit effectively into the slot of this thing. And what it's going to do is destroy the thing over time. This driver also fits completely across the width of the slot as well. This obviously is a smaller one. I do have a bigger one, but this one doesn't span the gap. Just going to add a little drop of oil into the thread on that pivot bolt as well. Just a little drop, just to make the whole adjustment a little bit easier. Put a little bit on these threads. So this one I've set up already. Just run that nut in, and I'll separate my two washers out. You can see how this bottom washer is going to sit against that nut, and I'm going to just try and drop that into place, like so. So the pivot nut itself is also threaded. So the next thing that we need to do is thread that adjuster screw into that pivot bolt. It's worthwhile doing this job before we've got too much more in the way here. In particular, the grass deflector. Once it's in place, it makes it really tricky to get to this to these adjuster screws. You know, as it is, the little pegs for the grass catcher are already sort of in the way. So we'll do what we can. And the other thing that we can do while we're running this screw in is throw the spanners around. Use the 11mm spanner just to hold that bolt in place so it doesn't get too far down the shaft of the adjuster screw. I believe, I'm not sure, this is the stainless steel adjuster screw. I believe they come in the non-stainless versions are also available with a, not a hex head, but an Allen key head, if that's of interest. I guess my thinking is much easier to use, but they're also going to get filled up with gunk. Just run that through like so. Hopefully you can see down below that adjusters come all the way through the pivot nut now. And what I'll do next is just start moving this bolt a little bit. I'll hold the adjuster in place and start moving that bolt up the shaft as well, because it needs to be snugged up considerably. It needs to be all the way up to the top. You can see that bearing housing moving as I move this bolt back and forth, which is what we want. A bit more. Nearly there with it. There we go, that's locked in now. At least enough for the moment so that we can get the other side down and then set this reel.